start when you're ready.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present today. I would like to introduce our entire Safe Digital consulting team. I'm Olivia Bias, here with Kirsten Harper-Smith and Nancy Pena. And the topic we'll be presenting on today are the ethical, legal, and financial perspectives of online behaviorally targeted advertising. So you have engaged us here today to help you explore new revenue opportunities for the brand new dating site that you're launching, heartmatch.com. And it should come as no surprise, but a great way to monetize the site is through ad revenue, right? Some of our biggest and most successful digital companies today, Facebook, Google, Yahoo, they all became multi-billion-dollar companies by building a successful ad revenue model. And so we're here to help you do the same. And specifically what I want to talk about is behaviorally targeted advertising, which is a specific form of online advertising that we're going to work through today. So first I want to review the results of a study commissioned by the Network Advertising Initiative, or NAI for short. And what they did was they surveyed their participating members, networks and advertisers within their group, to gauge the difference between the BT, I'm going to say BT, because behaviorally targeted is a mouthful, to survey the difference between a BT ad and a regular ad, which doesn't encompass the same type of targeting. And they explored the difference in price, so the difference in revenue opportunity, as well as the difference in performance, how well the ads perform. And they found that on average, a BT ad commanded over twice the revenue, so $4.12 cost per thousand versus $1.98 cost per thousand. And the second thing that they found was that it performed twice as well, over twice as well, with a 6.8% conversion rate as opposed to a 2.8% conversion rate. So what this means is, from a revenue perspective, obviously you can charge more for these kinds of ads, and then also they're more attractive to advertisers because they perform better. It allows them to get more bang for their buck, I guess you could say, because they have a higher conversion rate. So, but we really need to consider are the risks and costs associated with this kind of advertising. And the white elephant in the room is what users feel about this type of advertising, because it involves a lot of tracking and collection of user data on the back end. And this is also the heart of the ethical issue. There are a lot of consumer privacy advocacy groups that lobby Congress every day to get the laws changed to become more favorable to consumers. You may have heard every time there is some kind of breach or privacy violation, think of all the bad press that comes to Facebook or Apple or Instagram if their users feel that their privacy policies aren't in line with how they want to be tracked. Firefox recently announced that they're changing a future version of their browser settings to be opt-out, so companies won't be able to track this kind of data at all. So just in general, there is a big culture of fear and paranoia out there, and people aren't sure what's being tracked, how it's being tracked, what's being done with the data. So as an online dating business, you really have to consider these needs because people feel that a very crucial element of their personal privacy is being violated when they are being tracked in this way. And then it goes without saying, being that you're the founders of a dating website, people are coming to your site with a heightened sense of security or heightened sensibility about these issues of security and privacy anyway. You're going to have people on your site who are maybe lying about their age, maybe they're fibbing a little bit about their weight or their height. Maybe they don't want their friends or coworkers or family to know. Who really knows what's going on? But they're going to be especially sensitive to matters of privacy. So your job as the founders of this site is to create a sense of security for your users and make sure that they can trust you and that their information is safe with you and that it won't be violated. So what we're here to do today is recommend to you how to keep these issues in balance, right? On the one extreme, you can say, okay, we decide that we're not going to run any behaviorally targeted advertising, right? We don't think it's right to treat our users this way, so we're not going to allow this to happen with our site or with our user data. But on the other hand, you would have a very challenging time attracting ad revenue. Advertisers are looking for these type of ads to better reach their audience. But on the other side, you can say, let the cards fall where they may. Everyone does it. We're just going to track the data on these people. We don't really care how they feel, and just make as much money as we can. So neither of these responses is really appropriate to the situation. So what we're here to do today is to show you and recommend to you how you can run behaviorally targeted advertising, but do it in an ethically responsible manner that doesn't violate the core values and how you want to do business. So before we go any further, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about what exactly behaviorally targeted advertising is. Because you let us know that while you're all veteran business people and you started a number of companies, this is your first foray into a pure online business. So we just want to make sure the mechanics are clear. And BT advertising is easiest to understand through an example. So let's say you're on TripAdvisor one day and you're researching a trip to Hawaii. You're looking at flights, hotels, whatever, you're just gathering general research on what to do there. And then you close your session, you're done. And then the next day, you're on USA Today and you're reading a news article. You're not on the travel site, you're not on the travel section, you're not doing anything Hawaii related. And over to the side, you see an ad for Hawaiian Air. You might get the feeling like, oh, that's a coincidence. I was just looking for this the other day. But the reality is it's definitely not a coincidence, right? There's a really elaborate and deliberate process going on behind the scenes to make sure you saw that ad based on your previous behaviors. And in terms of it's pretty technically sophisticated how it all works in terms of the tracking, but all you really need to know is the concept of a cookie, which is a piece of information that is stored about your behavior by your web browser. So that way the next time you're online, it can be used to serve you more relevant ads pretty much. So pretty much all your user activities, clicks, searches, what pages you visit, all of this information is stored by your browser. And then what sites and data companies can do is they can transform those cookies into a user profile about you. For example, if you're in the TripAdvisor Hawaii example, you're transformed into a Hawaiian travel intender, right, that allowed you to be served that ad. And then you as an individual, your individual Hawaiian search isn't very valuable. But what data companies can do is aggregate tens of thousands of these similar type of cookies and create an audience of people. And that's where the real value lies, right? If you have tens of thousands of people who have demonstrated online they're interested in a Hawaiian flight, that's really valuable to an advertiser like Hawaiian Air, for example. So cookies provide the how in terms of how things are tracked. But now we just want to go through, we thought it'd be appropriate to take you through a day in the digital life of Joe Dater and what type of information is being tracked on him online. So the first thing he is likely to do is he's going to go do a search and say, what are good dating sites, right? If he's looking for a new dating site. And every single person in this room has done this. You go to Google, you type in a search, you get organic ads in the middle, and you get paid ads over on the right. So that's one form of search behavior. Another form of search behavior is within the site itself. So let's say Joe goes to a site, datingadvice.com. Everything he types into this search box right here is definitely tracked. And then the site can use this information to later serve him ads the next time he comes back online, or sell it to other companies. You know, hey, this person has done this, and then he can be targeted all throughout the internet. So those are two common forms of search behavior. And then let's say Joe decides he wants to check out Match.com, very popular dating site. And so he goes on there, and once he's within the site can track so much. They can track what source he came from, what site he goes to after. They can track clicks, links, what pages he visited, how much time he spent on each page. And what all this information does is you can data mine all this information and create a very rich profile of who Joe Dater is, what he likes to do, what he's interested in. And then wherever he goes online, this profile follows him and he can be served relevant ads. And the final major category of information that's tracked on people is information related to characteristics and demographics about the person. So if he is still on Match.com and he fills out a profile, he's going to give a lot of information for you: his age, his height, his location, his marital status, all of these things he's just going to give. So that's one way to get information on people, through registration information. But when most people are going around the internet, you don't register on every site that you go to. You don't create profiles, you don't log in. You're just clicking around and visiting random pages. Well, what data companies can do is for sites within their network, let's say, for example, Joe goes to Popular Mechanics, ESPN, and Maxim. It's very strong likelihood that he's male, right? They can make an inference because the readership of these sites is so strongly male. So this is obviously a very powerful tool in being able to identify an audience online when you don't have their inputted information. You can make inferences to target the right audience. So now that we reviewed how it all works, what's being tracked, I'm going to pass it off to Kirsten, and she's going to review the legal issues.
All right, thank you. So what we've just been talking about, or what Olivia has discussed, is non-PII information. That is non-personally identifiable information. This includes things like age, gender, city of residence, your personal interests, etc. Whereas personally identifiable information links directly to you. That's your full name, social security, credit card, etc. So the intent of the law is to make sure that those two things are separated. In addition, the law makes sure that the privacy policies are there. So first and foremost, they expect that the privacy policies are clear on the use of the data and how it's collected. As you can see right here, this is Apple's terms and conditions. This is a very long document and full of legal jargon. And the reality is most consumers are going to read the first few lines, see the bottom of the page where it says I accept, and move forward. And that is kind of the main issue that the industry has right now, is what this privacy policy is and how it's understood. So back with the legal environment, there's some of the existing laws out there that are notable is the Online Privacy Protection Act. This act is to mandate that all websites are clear with their privacy policy and it's easily accessible. But the reality is even though there's not strict laws out there about what has to happen online and what you're doing with your privacy policy, proposed legislation actually speaks to what the consumer's feeling and their kind of fears and that fear of paranoia and worrying about their privacy. First I'd like to mention is the Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights. This was recommended last year as guidelines for the industry by the Obama administration, and some of the main key points are security, transparency, individual consumer control, and that does speak very clearly to what the consumers are concerned about. In addition, this year the Right to Know Act was proposed by an assemblywoman, which basically would allow the consumer to go to a company and ask for all the data that has been collected on them over the past 12 months and where that data has gone and how it's been used. Also, the Do Not Track has been proposed by different entities to the FTC, which basically is very similar to the Do Not Call registry. So it would be a universal website or online that you can go and register your information, which would opt you out of being tracked. So when you're going through the internet, you're not being tracked. So as the Federal Trade Commission is for consumer protection and regulation of unfair and deceptive practices towards the consumer, it's really important to also note that they compel the industry and they ask the industries to voluntarily comply with the best standards for that industry without it necessarily being law. So what does that mean for the advertising industry? Well, in 2009, all of the big major advertisers got together and they produced the self-regulatory principles for online behavioral advertising. This document, about 25 pages, went through a lot of the main key points that all the people in the industry really, in the advertising industry specifically, need to focus on. That being transparency, education of the consumer, consumer control, and protecting sensitive information. As I previously mentioned, we are discussing non-personally identifiable information. However, it's imperative that the companies that are using both know how to separate it and separate it correctly. So from this document, a few measures have been implemented, one being ad choice. So this is when you're served a behaviorally targeted ad. This icon right here would pop up and it allows the consumer to click on it, and that little blurb will give them the information that says we've tracked your cookies, we followed you, and we feel that this is a good ad for you. So the consumer knows what's going on. Also, the opt-in and opt-out policies. So currently, everything by default is opt-in, and you really have to go back to your own internet settings to actually change it to be opt-out. But what the advocacy behind this is that the consumer knows how to opt out and that they know the difference between the two. So what happens if the law does step in and really start to mandate these things? Well, first and foremost, it's a violation of consumer trust. If the consumers feel that the industry was unable to actually regulate themselves and do what is right and the law has to mandate it, it just leads to more heightened insecurity and a question of, do I need to worry about something else that might be happening? And as we all know, regulation involves paperwork, and sometimes paperwork will hamper your ability to be as creative and innovative as you want to be. Lastly, there can be a lot of potential bad revenue losses. So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy, who's going to further explore that topic.
Thank you. Okay, so the main players in the dating website business have three sources of revenue. The first being user subscription fees, search and application, and selling available ad space on their website. User subscription fees can range from a standard monthly subscription to additional options for the user, such as ad-free service for which the user would pay a premium. Search and application consists of bundling and selling user demographic and behavioral information and selling it to media software companies for them to use on their website and to target users. And the other side of that coin would be selling it available ad space on your own website to these same companies for them to target your users. And so the main players in the dating website business have one of two revenue models. The case of plentyoffish.com, they rely 100% on ad-based revenue. And on the other side, we have sites like OkCupid and Match.com that rely on revenues from user subscription fees, from selling this demographic and behavioral information off to companies, and also search and applications. And so, as Kirsten was mentioning, a lot of these companies are self-regulating in an effort to be more transparent with the consumer. However, if a company were to choose not to self-regulate, there can be serious legal implications if, for example, the law were to step in. Sites like plentyoffish.com that rely 100% on ad-based revenue would be completely wiped out. They would have to find an additional source of revenue immediately, but the reality of it is that they're probably going to be eliminated very shortly after these laws come into effect. Sites like OkCupid and Match.com, they do have a blended model. They have different income revenue, sources of revenue. However, they would have to completely restructure their revenue models in order to offset such a significant loss in income. And so it's very important for you as a business to consider these legal risks in terms of cost, in terms of what it means for your business. And so in the daily activities of your dating website, you'll be processing, storing, using, and disclosing personal information from your users. And so you'll also be working with different companies such as credit card processors, governmental agencies, and the users themselves. And so with so many different parties involved, it's very likely you'll have different views of what personal privacy means. In addition to that, you also run the risk of data leaks or security breaches. And so this inevitably means that you will be sued by your users. And so, like I said before, it's very important for you to consider these legal and external risks before you go into this venture. You need to be sure that you invest money into a safe and secure infrastructure, not only to protect yourselves, but to be more ethically responsible about what you do with your user information, and also to create a more sound financial future for your business in terms of minimizing legal risk. So with that said, I'll hand it over to Kirsten for our final solutions and recommendations.
Great, thank you. So we've gone through the mechanics of online behavioral targeted advertising. We've looked at the legal perspectives, we've looked at the financial perspectives. But again, I want to reiterate that the importance here is your user and the ethical concerns with that, and that being that most users are really not very educated about this process, and you should not take advantage of their lack of knowledge. So first and foremost, it is imperative that you as a company are proactive and vigilant about your users' privacy policy, or users' privacy. So that means strictly adhering to the online, the self-regulatory practices and reviewing the Consumer Bill of Rights and implementing these things at your company. Also, as Nancy just mentioned, it is absolutely imperative that you build a strong, secure infrastructure. This can be done by some of the great programmers out there, but it's imperative that you make sure that that non-personally identifiable information is separated from the personally identifiable information so that there's no leaks or breaches, because that could be detrimental to your company. And as far as education of your consumer, and letting them know and understand the privacy policy, we think that you can do this in very different formats that can be creative and fun. One idea we had was, why not create a video format? You highlight the key points of your privacy policy and how it works, and then link to the actual legal formal document. The same could be done for an email. You could also make sure that throughout the site, you're again informing the user of how they're being tracked, and leave it throughout the site. You can also do this in the pricing information. Which leads me to another point. So with your pricing options, because there are these sensitivities to users' data, you can implement a subscription where there's a monthly fee that would subsidize the ad revenues that you would be getting for tracking a person. However, that would allow the person to not be tracked and not be served the ads, but they would be paying a monthly fee. And then on the flip side, you can keep it a free service, but you need to educate and let the user know that you will be tracking their cookies and their data, and you will be selling that to get to outside sources so that they can be served the ads. And by doing this, by leading with respect for your consumer and their privacy, you will be separating yourself from competition. You are letting the community know, your users know, that you believe that their privacy is imperative, and you're making it a priority. By doing this, you're creating a very strong sense of security for the user. You're letting them know that you make sure that their information is handled correctly, that there's no possibility of a breach, and then you let them know if you're getting ads, this is how you're getting them and why, or if they choose the subscription method, they know very much that what they're getting into. So it's all about transparency and education. So with that, I would like to turn it over to any questions you have, and thank you for your time.
Well, let me start by saying thank you very much. That was very informative, and you all did a very good job of presenting the information. You can see you did a lot of research into it. So I just like to say that I think it was very well presented, lots of information, good solutions, and I'm going to open it up to the rest of our judges to see what comments or questions they may have.
I'm a bit concerned that there may not be enough revenue in this venture based on restricting the advertising.
So restricting the advertising. So we're saying that you can still collect data on users, but you can actually price your user fee. So one option would be if you can give a free option to users and let them know, hey, you're going to see ads, there's this type of tracking in place. But you can also have a blended model. If users don't want that and they're not comfortable, you can charge a subscription as well. So for those users where there is a restriction, you'll be getting paid back on the subscription side.
One of the reasons why I've objected to us even going into this business is because I have issues with the concept of online dating, period. I feel that the people that are using that are vulnerable. We can't know. I can't know. I don't think you can know the honesty or the truth or accuracy of the statements that are being made. Anybody can depict themselves as 5'10", about average, and so forth, and worry about what happens down the road. This is historical with letters by mail, marriage by mail, and this kind of thing. So if we go into this and we go into creating a service for folks we don't know anything about, why would we not want to do it advertisement free and go on a strictly user subscription basis and decide that that's going to be our niche marketing and not have to worry about the advertising and the tracking, we still build our secure infrastructure. You know, I know it's not a business model, I know it's an ethics model, but I can kind of see both of things happening here, and I'd like to have heard something, and maybe you're still time, about the options of not doing advertising at all.
Sure. So in terms of not doing advertising at all, so what we're trying to balance this with is that the internet is mostly free. People have access to virtually unlimited content and services, Google Earth, Gmail, news. People are very accustomed to things being free on the internet. And we actually think that if you go in with a completely subscription-based model with no ads, no tracking whatsoever, that you're actually going to exclude that big chunk of people who just want it to be free. So I think probably being a little bit more flexible is the way to go. And in terms of concerns with online dating in general, there is definitely a big issue between privacy and security, right? So when you're on there and you're meeting someone digitally, that to us is more of a security issue as opposed to a behavior tracking issue, right? Because you have to go out there, you have to meet them, you have to see if they are who they say they are online. So in terms of security controls, we would also recommend, and this is a little bit separate from the advertising, we would also recommend that perhaps you can offer like a background check service or something like that to make people feel more secure that who they're meeting is what they say they are.
Well, I wasn't thinking about the security issue. I was thinking about the privacy issue. And look at your Hawaii ad you used as an example. Okay? So today I want to go to Hawaii, and I do a search for Hawaii. I find out where I want to go. I book Maui for 2 weeks. I book Hawaiian Air, and I'm done. Now, next week I'm going to be barraged for who knows how long with electronic junk mail because someone stole my cookies. Right? Maybe if I had, as a consumer, the opportunity to belong to a subscription travel log agency where for $1 a month or $2 a month or whatever the charges are, my search for that instant isn't tracked. Right? So I don't have to go to Bonds and use my card and have them know when I'm buying Pace. I don't have to go to Shell and use my card and get rewards that they now know that I'm buying Shell instead of Chevron. All of this kind of stuff is the privacy talk that I'm dealing with. And I'm wondering if our ethics might not be better served if we offer people a safe haven from that assault. And we then can say we're going to take the high road in privacy as well as in advertising. But I don't want to get you off track because I know what we hired you for, but this is kind of where I was hoping to hear.
Yeah, no, I mean, all of those concerns are completely valid, which is why we recommend a subscription-based option for people who are completely uncomfortable with this. But the reality is there's still a big group of users who really don't care.
See, that's the financial aspect of it. I'm talking about the ethical aspect. If the people don't care, do we have an ethical obligation to protect people who don't care? If people have no concern about their privacy, whether it's used, whether they opt in or opt out, do I have an ethical obligation to protect those people? Or is my ethical obligation as a company running a match service to protect people who might care or who do care?
Right, and so you protect them by informing them and educating them and giving them choice to opt out.
I see. Okay, thank you.
My ethical dilemma here, hoping you can help me think through this, is on one hand we're saying we'll be strong privacy advocates, but then on the other hand our ethical model is going to be selling them the right to privacy. How can we be strong advocates and sell them the right to privacy at the same time?
Well, I think the bottom line is that the consumer deserves the choice. However, you can't make a choice if you're not informed. Therefore, we need to be transparent and educate them. So we are giving them the options to go one way or the other, but we're making it clear that this is what happens with your data in the process within our website. That does make you a leader because most consumers, frankly, don't really understand the process. Olivia did a great job of, just simplifying how cookies work. We know that it's a very complex machine behind it. But if you can simply and be straightforward and tell someone what privacy really is and what you're doing with their information, you are fulfilling your ethical obligation and you're doing what other companies are not doing.
So I'm on the opposite end of Steve.
That's what makes us go around.
I don't have a problem with selling the ad space, selling the cookies information. If they click the box on the click wrap agreement and it says that I get their firstborn, and they click it, I get it. I mean, I don't have a problem with sharing the information. It's up to the consumer to read the contract and decide whether they don't like it or not. So, what say you to that?
That's really out of line with the core values of the company that you let us know in terms of respect, trustworthiness, fairness, just completely disregarding these issues and taking advantage of the knowledge gap. That's really where the ethical issue is. So in terms of having a giant legal contract show up and just click I accept and make them go through, that really is not transparency and being fair with your user. You need to find other ways to be proactive in getting them the information.
If we go with the tiered privacy structure, the pay for privacy model, do we have increased liability if we in fact do have a breach? Because we've told some folks you're basically involved, but then the information goes out anyway. Does that increase our risk? Do we get into issues of fraud at that point?
I think you're giving them the option. Like I said in one of my slides, what was it? You're giving them the option of opting in or opting out. And so you're giving them all the information and they're making this informed decision. And so if they go ahead and they want to purchase that additional option for that extra service, that's fine, but you're letting them know up front. So did that answer?
Well, if they purchase that option, we're in fact entering into a contract with them. So does that increase our liability if we have a breach?
So the real concern is with their personal information, their personally identifiable information, things like full name, credit card, address, this type of information. You really need to organize the back end of your website to make sure that information is completely separate from any sort of data used for marketing purposes. So you can do things on the technical side to ensure that these two areas remain separate. So and if you do this, then the risk of personal information getting out is very low. So you definitely need to do due diligence in getting that straightened away. And then in terms of the other risk, I mean, there is risk of there is risk, but it's relatively low as long as you structure things properly.
Right, but I think to add to that, the pricing structure doesn't change the privacy, like Olivia just mentioned. You have to, no matter what, whether you had pricing or free subscription, you have to separate the personally identifiable information and the not personally identifiable information. The law does not allow you to let that information out and give it to people. You have to protect that. I'm going to forget all the acronyms because I'm going to, but 2011 there's the Privacy Policy Act or maybe Privacy Act that makes sure that is separated and that is unallowable, and you have to keep that secure. It's just like if you go to a credit card company or a bank, that information can't leak out. Is there a risk? Of course there's a risk because there's hackers out there, there's ways that things can be breached, but that's why it's imperative you spend that extra money and make sure you separate those two categories.
Right, so you want to invest the money now into a secure and strong infrastructure to avoid that legal liability in the future, whether they're paying for it or not.
Throw it open to my fellow investors, members, to give you whatever feedback. We could probably take as much time as you would like. Finish a few minutes early on both ends, something here.
Good job. Well done.
I wanted to say how I thought you did very well handling the drunk pushback. For both Anthony and myself, I thought you were composed and responded well and maintained the subject matter expert position. And that's tough to do, and good for you.
Yeah, I think you were firm in your conviction. This is what we have to do, and this is what we think that you should do if you're going to go into this business. There was no wavering. The law says that we've got to do certain things with the identifiable information versus the non-identifiable information, but we also think that you, as an entity going into this business, should take these additional things into consideration. The one concern I had, and I didn't raise the question because I couldn't quite frame it, I don't want to, is our stance on the ethical issues going to in some way make us less viable or less competitive with our competitors? I agree that the ethical issue is very important, but I just wondered at what point those two cross. Is there potential for not being as competitive?
Is that a question? Oh, okay. Yeah. No. So
Because you're the experts, I don't know.
Yeah. So that is actually a really interesting issue. And the internet in general is a relatively new landscape, right? And the laws right now are actually very favorable to advertisers and publishers, much more so than they are to the consumer. Things are changing. There's a lot of consumer privacy groups out there right now. There's a lot of bad press that comes out when Facebook or whatever does something that makes everyone mad, right? So the tides are definitely changing. And being that there is such a lack of really strong legislation as opposed to something like pharmaceuticals or something like that, I think actually being proactive and being in early and doing what you need to do up front, you're actually going to be able to help set the stage for what needs to be done. Plus, you're also going to obviate the need for the law to have to step in and protect consumers. If you are buttoned up and you're like, listen, there's nothing personally identifiable that's going to get out, people have full transparency and education and being able to opt out, then you're doing what you need to do. And in terms of the fairness to the business, in terms of being able to generate revenue, it's really important, right? The internet is very free, and there are millions of engineers back there who are creating these products that no one is paying for, and the advertisers are paying the bill. So I think protecting their interests while also keeping consumers at the forefront and letting them know what's going on, letting them know that this is how it works, I think that's definitely where trend things are going to go. So does it make you less competitive? No, I think it actually makes you cutting edge and ahead of the curve.
And to add to that, you have to keep in mind that this business is very referral based, so you're going to get a lot of positive PR, a lot of good word of mouth. And so when you've got happy users that feel comfortable and secure using your site, they're going to tell all their friends, and I think that's how you'll get a majority of more business coming into you.
I had just a few comments here. You guys are very, very knowledgeable about this area, and I appreciate you enlightening us on just all of the privacy issues I've dealt with it before. Where the click-wrap agreement did say some outrageous stuff. And somebody in the company clicked it and said yes, and they're actually agreeing to do something that was against the law. So it was, so I'm familiar with it, and revisiting it with you is excellent. A couple suggestions though on your presentation. The company Heart Match should have a specific business plan that, in your example, it seems to be just very broad and amorphous. I wanted something a little more specific in what our business plan was and what the quandary was that we were dealing with. And that way there, you could go back and you could say, you know, Match.com was faced with a similar situation, and they adjusted their privacy agreements or their consumer agreements in order to address this particular issue. Or there was a breach of privacy in one other one, and so they made specific changes, and these are considerations that you need to take. I think that it drilled down into a very specific problem so that we can know that it's a very real life situation as opposed to a theoretical issue. Would be helpful. The other thing too is that the internet isn't just in the United States, you know, and one of the things that I was wondering about was, okay, well, you know, once you open this company up, what's to stop somebody in Paris from, you know, or somebody from Germany, or somebody from, you know, from Russia, or, you know, and how do you deal with the Euro regulations in this area, or, you know, the different regulations in China or Japan. So there's, you know, once you delve into this area, you really have to think about it globally, not just within the United States. There was, I didn't get any, I saw the concept of charging the subscription as being a financial piece to it, but I didn't see any discussion about the financial implications in the event that there's a breach of the agreement or a breach of one of these regulations, and what will happen to the company? How will it impact the revenue? If our projected revenues under this business plan are X amount, what can we expect to be the projected losses that we would have in the event that there was some type of breach within it? So that was an area that I hoped to hear something about, and I didn't. How much is it going to cost for the company to create this program, and is the cost minimal compared to the savings? And that type of balancing of, you know, what can we anticipate as being the expense of setting this new ethical standard? And then finally, one last thing, selling a subscription could be a great way of telling people that, you know, if you don't want to date a cheapskate, you know, pay somebody who's willing to pay for the subscription.
Yeah.
You know, there's just a different thought.
Yeah, that's great. In fact, you should probably make it as, when people look at your profile, they can see you as
I bought a subscription.
Thank you for the feedback.
Good presentation, thank you. To take the international example a little closer to home, say if you're using the federal definition of PII, did you give any thought to what happens if California, Massachusetts decides to expand what PII is, and how would your business model react to that? That might have been a good thing to touch on.
Yeah.
And one other thing that might have been useful was some examples of this is PII that we will never share, this is non-PII that, hey, we're going to let anybody have. You know, and this is the gray area where you can opt in and out. Just some hard examples of what those three categories would be.
Okay.
To just make it a little more clear.
Yeah, thank you.
But overall, really good. Thank you.
I like the way you interacted as well. It was very sort of
We've been practicing for a long time.
You should. Very polished.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.